This edition of Mac Voices is brought to you by Squarespace. Everything you need to create an exceptional website. For a free trial and 10% off your first purchase on new accounts, go to squarespace.com/MacVoices and use the offer code MacVoices3. Welcome to Mac Notables on Mac Voices. I'm Chuck Joyner, and this is the talk of the Mac community. We are way overdue to have a chat with Mr. Jim Dalrymple of The Loop, and so we're going to fix that right now. Jim, it's good to see you.
You too, Chuck.
I got busy toward the end of the year, or the beginning of the year, I should say, with CES and Macworld. You ended up going to NAMM, and yes, we missed you at Macworld, of course. So I thought that's where we'll start. How was NAMM?
NAMM was very good. For those that don't know, it's an expo really all about music and instruments and every kind of music app and instrument that you can possibly imagine. So I had a great time down there and, got to play a lot of guitars, got to see some friends and, have a good time.
And now, see, when you say see friends, it's not like the rest of us who see friends. You see people who typically the rest of us would really like to meet at some point and hang out with. It's not just the guy who happens to build the guitars. It's the people who play the guitars.
Yeah, there was a few of those too. It was a lot of fun, it's kind of strange just to be walking down the hallway and have somebody tap you on the shoulder, and it's this guy that who happens to be a friend, but is a famous player as well, so that's kind of fun.
To your credit, I always have to pull names out of you. You don't name drop unless I drag them out. So give me some idea of who you were rubbing elbows with this time, who you talked to.
Well, the guy that I was walking down the hall, I was actually just walked up on an escalator, and I got a tap on the shoulder, and he said, "Hey, Jim, how you doing?" And I turned around, and it was David Ellefson from Megadeth. So, that was nice. See Dave again. And Jordan Rudess from Dream Theater. I talked to him for a little bit. All great guys. Kerry King, some...
From Slayer.
From Slayer, yeah. So just some great people. They all have their stage persona when they get up there and they're rocking and playing. But, they're regular guys,
And I guess we all fall into that trap. We forget, especially in that particular arena, there are some big egos out there, but for the most part, they're just normal people doing what we do. They just do it in front of bigger crowds.
Yeah. Yeah. But, it's really nice to see them, and I had fun. I had a lot of fun.
That's great. Jim, it seems like anytime we talk about NAMM, we usually do a conversation about this time of year about NAMM and sort of the state of the Mac and Apple technology in the professional music world. And you have a lot of connections there. Anything new this year, any new trends, or is it just sort of where it has been? It's very well entrenched. It's a critical part of that environment.
The Mac is certainly very well entrenched there. There's always the Logic Pro Tools type of thing going on, and Apple's Logic is still doing very well. Most of the booths, if not all of them, had Macs in there showcasing their software or whatever it was, but there was a lot of iOS stuff. And the iOS stuff, unlike Macworld, when iOS stuff started showing up at Macworld, it was cases and things like that. But at NAMM, it's devices to like a pedal board that works with your iPad, that type of stuff to change pedals. So it's really cool stuff that people are coming up with for iOS. And, amp makers are putting out software for iOS. Agile Partners is one, and IK Multimedia, with Amplitude. Everybody is really working hard on that because they see the market potential there. So, there was a big move towards that this year.
We've talked to people about the digitization of art, And we went through that period where, wow, if it's made with a computer, then it's not real art. And I think we've gotten way beyond that now. How about on the music side? There was a time that computer music meant electronica, and and sequencing, and a lot of things of that nature that did not sound organic, did not sound like analog. Now we have iPad apps, and I think you've been on here and talk about them, that can simulate a dozen different guitar cabinets.
Yeah.
Is in the realm of NAMM, is that looked down upon as
No.
not traditional?
No, not at all. I mean, these are the professional players and engineers that are at this show, and there's a reality that digital is here. There are still some people like Slash, for instance, that really likes to record on tape. That's just how he likes to do it, and he'll probably always record on tape as long as he can find it, I guess. But that's just what he likes to do. But most people, they're in that digital realm. They understand. They're Pro Tools users or Logic users, and that's what they do. So there's nobody that really looks down on it. I mean, a decade ago, when you looked at recording or mixing a bunch of tracks and you put a plug-in on, it might not have been as good as the original, but we've come so far in looking at universal audio plugins, which is what I use, and I love them because they started a lot of the analog hardware in the 50s. That's what they were using. They invented a lot of this stuff, and now they have digital replications of this hardware. So I got to meet the chief scientist at Universal Audio, who goes in and looks at all of the transistors and the parts and measures them and does the same thing in software. So it reacts the exact same way. And this is the smartest guy I have ever met in my life. He's incredible, just incredibly smart. He could lose you 3 words into a conversation if he wanted to. He really could. But I like that. I like that things respond the same way that they would in the analog world. So, yeah, we've come a long way. It's not just it looks like that. It sounds like it now, too. And companies are pouring a lot of money in to make sure that that's what we get. Do
you think it is taking anything away from the creation of music? Not the recording of music. I mean, that's kind of in my mind, a whole separate discipline. But just the creation of music.
No, I think it's actually the opposite. It's helping the creation of music, because now musicians can record anywhere. They can be on a tour bus and record a song on an iPad if they want, or they record, a riff for what will become a new song. That's important. It's important as a songwriter to have that access, where you can jot down a riff or record it, on your iPhone. And then, because for me, if I have an idea for a riff, if I don't do something with it right away, it's gone within minutes. As soon as I start thinking about something else, that's gone. So, and it never comes back. So, that I think is a lot better. Now, there's always things that, with the guitar, when you look at a real guitar amp and, you turn it up, there's a certain sound that, is very hard to capture. And when you hit a chord on a guitar playing through a real amp, it moves air. I mean, it hits your chest. There's something physical about that that's almost impossible to get in software. They get the sound, they get the tone, but to have that feeling of air moving your clothes and your chest, I don't know how they would ever do that. But, that's one of the things. It's things like that are missing from the whole digital era. But, you don't get that when you're listening to a recorded session. You hear what the mixer and the mastering engineer wants you to hear. You don't get that pounding of the chest, but as a player, you kind of want that. So, when I record, sometimes I record on my with a real amp, my Marshall, and plug in a Les Paul to it, and there's just no sound like that, no sound. But when I record something, I'll do that, but I'll also record a couple of tracks using software, so that I can put some little effects in there and tweak that sound. So I have the hard, crunchy, JCM 800 sound of a Marshall amp, but underneath of that, there's some software amps and stuff going on, and I mix them all together, and it comes out with a great sounding track.
You make a great point about the difference between live and recorded. No matter how good the recording is, no matter how great the live recording is of your favorite band in a live environment, you bring it home and it's still not the same as standing in the first or second row and getting that visceral experience. And that's to say, I'm like you, I don't know that it can ever be reproduced unless somebody has just an ungodly amount of money and some kind of setup like that, and that's never going to be practical. So, but I'm also glad to hear that the digital part is not looked down on, because I think, I think what this can do for the amateur musician, just for kids, what they can do that they could not do ever before.
Well, a part of what I love about the software is that I can experiment with sounds. I can experiment with, a dozen delay pedals, from classic ones right up to ones that were released a year or so ago that are available in software. And try and imagine going out and buying all of these classic amps and classic pedals. I mean, it would cost you $1 million to go out and buy all this stuff that you get in software. So if the software is well done, you can really have a lot of fun in experimenting with. What if I use this old fuzz pedal that they used back in the 70s, and instead of a distortion pedal, you use this fuzz pedal, and that gives you, a different sound. And for young people that are coming in, to be able to, for a couple $100, go out and get this piece of software that has, 20 or 30 amps and all kinds of pedals, and to start mixing things around and moving things back and forth to see what kind of sounds they can get. That's great. They may end up buying a real amp someday and say, I want these types of pedals, because they know what they're looking for in the sound. And I think it helps. I get sounds in my head that I try and get out in music. And a lot of times most of the time I get those out in software, because I just don't have all of the gear that it would take to get that sound out. So yeah, it's a good thing.
I do get a little concerned, just what you said, for a couple $100, you can go out and get, 25 different pedals or whatever. And is that going to hurt the pedal market? Now, I know, again, what you just said is that might encourage someone to go and buy one of the actual real ones. But we've seen this in music, and we've seen it in video in some ways, that this is good enough. And that concerns me, that we're seeing not a dumbing down, but maybe a loss of something here, because sometimes this good is good enough and it's not necessarily the real thing.
I don't think so. I don't know that we've seen that, because the pedal makers, Jim Dunlop, which is what I use, the MXR pedals are just fantastic, and they keep coming out with new things. Monique just bought me 2 new pedals for Christmas. Even though I have every software application that you could possibly want for guitar, I still play most of the time on my amp, and I have a wah pedal, a Zakk Wylde overdrive, a Black Label chorus pedal, a flashback delay, and an MXR Smart Gate. That's all that I have. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. And most of the time, everything is either on or off. Where I don't have delay on all the time, but I always have the smart gate on. But once in a while, I'll sit down with software and do that. But the majority of the time, I'm playing like this, and that may be because I'm old. And I started off playing with the analog, but I think that most players aren't closed-minded. When they start playing and they get serious about playing, when they go on stage, some of them may use digital stuff, but I think that most players will pick up an amp too, and they'll supplement one with the other, whatever that one is, and maybe that will change over time. Maybe they'll start using more digital stuff and supplement it with real amps instead of what they're doing now. But either way, they're still getting both done. And talking about a noise gate is a pedal that it cuts out a lot of the hum and everything when players stop playing, especially with high gain amps. You get that feedback, that screeching sound when they stop. Well, noise gate will cut that out. As soon as you stop playing, it stops. The problem with a noise gate is that a lot of times you have holding a note in a solo, and once it gets to a certain point, the noise gate will cut in and cut it off, and it's very abrupt and it's very harsh most of the time. The new smart gate that I got for MXR, it recognizes what's a note and what's noise, so it'll actually hold a note. The gate will come on and start blocking off all the noise, and the note's still ringing through. So that's what I'm talking about, that, MXR is still innovating. That's a very innovative thing to do, because as a guitar player, I want to be able to hold that note and have it ring, but without all the feedback and noise coming in. So that's why I think that it's still safe. And while we're talking, I'm playing with a bunch of picks.
You mentioned Jordan Rudess from Dream Theater. We talked to him at Macworld last year, and I think it might be worth noting, and I'll put a link in the show notes to that discussion, that he wrote a music app that is basically a software musical instrument, not a guitar, not a keyboard, something very different. He did a little rendition of Somewhere Over the Rainbow for us right there, and it's fascinating.
Add a little vibrato, and then slide. Change to another key. Watch.
You think, wow, if I were a kid and had any interest in music, what I could do with that. And I didn't look it up, but it's a couple bucks. It's certainly not $20 or $30. So,
and it should be.
Well, that's a great question. Maybe it should be. I would certainly think so. But on the other hand, it does make it accessible. It makes it an impulse buy in fact, less than an impulse buy for what it does. If I'm interested at all, I'm going to buy this thing and play with it.
Yeah. Well, Jordan is a very talented guy, and he uses his iPad on stage during his solo. he brings the app up on stage with his iPad. So he's not only doing a keyboard thing, he's doing an iPad solo. You know, I mean, the man is just so talented. It's kind of crazy, but.
And we're going to see more and more of that. I mean, most of the music you and I like hasn't gotten to that point where you see the iPad come up on stage and be part of the actual performance. But there are plenty of bands out there that are doing it, and it's going to become pervasive. So it's very interesting to see how it's all going to develop.
Yeah, and you never know how it's going to develop. You know, you could have your favorite rock band using some of this stuff, or you know, it could be the new music, and you know, the rock stuff is going to follow along later. You don't know, but yeah, it's all going to run its course.
Yeah. Mac Voices is brought to you by Squarespace, the beautiful and intuitive website publishing platform that allows anyone to create professional web pages, blogs, online stores, and galleries on a single platform. For a free trial and 10% off your first purchase on new accounts, go to squarespace.com/MacVoices and use the offer code MacVoices3. And they just launched built-in e-commerce, so you can sell digital and physical items from your website, all within the Squarespace platform. That's squarespace.com/MacVoices and the offer code MacVoices3 to get 10% off your first purchase. So let's shift gears a little bit. As we record this, and there was a note on the loop recognizing that Apple is the number one admired company.
Yeah.
What's wrong with this picture when Wall Street says, oh my God, you know, Apple is failing, Apple is not doing what it should, Apple's not selling enough stuff. I realize those are two separate things, admired versus performance, but I just don't get it.
I don't get it either. And, you know, I had a reporter ask me a week or so ago, why is Apple starting to lose sales? And, you know, why is their stock is going down? Because they're losing sales. and I said, before I answer that question, I'm going to say something, and I want you to answer a question for me. And they said, okay, fine. So I said, looking at their last financial report, they sold a record number of iPhones, a record number of iPads. They had record revenue, and they had a $13.1 billion profit for the quarter, which was also a record. Where is it that they're losing? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I really don't know. Where are they losing? You tell me where they're losing, and I'll answer your question for you. And they couldn't answer that question. They said, well, yeah, sure, those are the numbers. What?
Yeah. And the backlash within the Mac and Apple community was kind of interesting, and it wasn't fanboyish. It was just that. It's like, are you people paying attention?
Yeah.
And it's the expectations that Wall Street sets, that these analysts seem to set, that have no basis in fact.
Right.
And if you look at their records, you know, that's the interesting thing that never seems to get brought up except by some of the dedicated people in this community and maybe some others. I don't know. We don't pay attention to some others. But you look at their records, at what they thought was going to happen when what actually happened, the records are pathetic.
Well, and these people keep saying that Apple's last products weren't disruptive. They weren't game-changing. They didn't do what the first iPhone did. But not every product can do that. You release a game-changing product, and then you do iterative upgrades to that product, and you do design changes, and you do different things. And that's what Apple did with the iPhone. And that's what they've done with the iPad. And what gets me when these people say, well, Apple's last announcement wasn't game-changing and it didn't, blow the lid off the whole industry. Most companies once in their history can say, we released a game-changing product. We released something so great. The Sony Walkman, the Nintendo, products like this that are just the Mac. They're so big and so disruptive to an industry and to society that company can say, wow, look what we've done. And they will be remembered in history for what they did. Apple's done it 5 times. The Mac, the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad, not to mention the different software things that they've done, like the iTunes Store. They changed the world for online music sales. And now they're moving into movies and TV. The distribution for digital content was changed by Apple. And then if you look at those hardware products, they changed the world with those. And it's not just, they released a successful product. No, they disrupted everything in the cell phone market when they released the iPhone in 2007. So how do you top that in 5 years, 6 years? Well, the clear answer is that you don't. You don't top that, because those are things that only happen once in a while, and only very special companies. And Sony is not doing so well now, but they were. The Walkman was the best-selling device of all time until the iPod took that. So I like to ask the analysts and the writers that write this stuff. So Apple has had 5 or 6 game-changing things. What have you done? And people have asked me what, by the way, that question doesn't go over very well.
No, I didn't think so.
People say, forget what I was going to say. I interrupted myself and forget. Oh, about Tim Cook, that, how is Tim Cook doing? And, this is what Tim Cook needs to do in order to save Apple. Well, you know what? You're a writer. You spend most of the time in your basement, not showered, and you think that you're qualified to give Tim Cook advice on running $1 billion company? No, you're a writer. You're barely qualified to do that. So how do you think that you're qualified to give Tim Cook or anybody at Apple advice on running the world's most successful company right now? Again, clear answer is you're not. We can say things that we would like to see in Mountain Lion, or whatever the next one will be. I would love to have 4G, in my laptop so that I can connect all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. But for a writer or somebody else who's not qualified to come out and say, here are 5 reasons that Apple will fail in the next 5 years because they're not innovative. What? How do these people know what Apple has planned between now and 5 years from now? They don't. So how can you say that they're not being innovative unless you have access to their research department? They don't know that. All it is a headline to get page views and clicks. That's it.
And being innovative, we've gone through a period where there has been a huge amount of innovation, not just by Apple, but by other companies too,
Yep.
in a lot of different areas. But game changing, the game can only change so quickly and so many times. Frankly, the consumer will only tolerate so many game changes and so many times. They were hungry for a device that did what the iPhone did.
Yeah,
There was
and
no
the
question.
iPad.
Yeah, I'm not sure they were hungry for the iPod, but the iPod was a better device, and they became hungry for it. Up to that, at one point, one album was plenty to carry around. Maybe 2.
Well,
but
see, that's it with this whole thing, and that's the great thing about having these disruptive products that Apple does. They didn't invent most of these categories, but they made the categories hugely popular. So take the iPod. The iPod is an MP3 music player. By all accounts, it was expensive when it came out. You could hold 1,000 songs in your pocket. We look at it now and laugh. 1,000 songs. But at the time, you could hold 10 songs. You know?
Yep.
So Apple took a product category, MP3 players, looked at them, saw how poor they were, and changed it. And people loved it. They still sell millions of iPods a quarter. I mean, most companies would kill to have the sales that Apple does just of the iPods. And they did the same thing with the smartphones. I mean, there was no real smartphone like the iPhone. Everything looks like an iPhone now, but there was nothing then. And Apple changed the way that we think about the phone, the way that we interact with the phone. And now, I mean, we all seem to agree that we have a computer in our pocket with the iPhone. And tablets have been out Microsoft had those big ugly tablets out for a decade before the iPad. So Apple never said that they invented the tablet, but they reinvented the entire tablet market. Everything coming out looks like an iPad in one way or another. Even Microsoft's silly little thing that they're playing with now. For all intents and purposes, it looks like an iPad as well. It certainly doesn't work as good as an iPad, but it looks like it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not necessarily about inventing an industry and a market category, but improving for the consumers the way that we do things. The Apple TV does that. I use the Apple TV all the time. I watch my own content. I rent content. I buy content, and it's easy. The remote has 4 buttons? I mean, that's great. So I ramble. I'm rambling.
No, but you're making great points. And the Apple TV is a really good example. The Apple TV is not a whiz-bang device. It's not an expensive device. It doesn't change the world. It clearly disrupts things. But to me, the beauty of the Apple TV, and by the way, I don't think it's perfect either by any means.
Right.
But the ease, the fact that it takes away so much friction to accessing your content or accessing a lot of online content. If you've tried some of the other boxes, and I'm not going to slander anybody, because they work just fine once you get to the content and hit the play button. But getting to that content, accessing it, and then pausing it, going back, and all that, it's not necessarily easy, and you have to work at it a little bit. And Apple, at least so far, the Apple TV is the closest thing to the idea of just sitting down and hitting the channel up, channel down button, which who wants to do with what broadcast TV has on?
Yeah, well, exactly. And, there are certainly changes. And the Apple TV is probably not a disruptive product. I mean, they came into a market. They've done some things. They tapped into what they did with iTunes, which was disruptive. So they tapped into that. I don't think that they've found what they want to do yet with Apple TV. But even now, it suits a purpose for me. I enjoy watching the Apple TV, and I go on Led Zeppelin concert. Boom, bought. I mean, that it's done right there, and there's a movie or a concert.
But I've got to disagree with you on the disruptive part, and it's interesting we're having this discussion today. Last night, my cable modem started to flake out a little bit, so I took it into Comcast and exchanged it. And that's why we're having this conversation, because everything is back to working normally. While I'm in line over lunch to exchange it, there are 3 people in front of me in line. 2 of them are turning in their converters. I heard the one say, "We canceled our service." The other one said, I'm not using it anymore because I'm checking out Netflix and I really like it better than what you have on. And I thought, wow, that's just coincidental. But there's one guy saying, and I didn't get a chance to ask him why he canceled. I really wanted to. It's like, it's none of my business, but why? But the other girl, and she volunteered that to the Comcast person who looked like they'd been hit in the face. So I think there's a quiet disruption going on here.
Well, Apple TV, Netflix. I don't know about Hulu. I tried that once, and it was so poor that I canceled it right away. But Netflix is doing a really good job. I really like their service and have for a while. I wish that they could get content sooner. But Netflix is they're going out on a limb too with that new series that they just put out. Forget what it's called, but
yeah. You mean the one that's self-produced?
Yeah. And great actors, and they put the whole thing out at once instead of once a week. So you got to give them credit. They're trying to do different things. So,
and there we go. That's an innovation in itself. The way that they approached it. Apple went one way with the innovation. They're going another.
Yep.
I don't know if there'll be a winner or whether it just is two different options that will. But they're clearly sliding into maybe not the dominant, but the significant space when it comes to online content viewing.
Yeah, I mean, Apple was smart to include Netflix on the Apple TV. That was a very wise decision for them. I think that's what people want to see more. I would love to see HBO and Showtime and channels like that on my Apple TV. I would certainly pay for that. Because those are the people that are making the good programs. NBC, CBS, those programs aren't very good at all. So yes, I would pay for that, and I'd be very happy with it. Because you go and rent a TV show now, which I do. When you miss something or whatever happens, I go on and you just rent it and it starts playing right away, and there's no commercials. And it's done. Great. Love it.
Yeah, agreed.
So in that way, it's disruptive, but I don't think that it's reached the level of disruption that the other products have.
Oh, agreed. 100%. Yeah.
It could at some point, but it's not up to those levels. Right now they kind of throw it out there and see what happens, and they're selling a lot of them. And they're making money off of purchases and things like that. So,
and I think it could get there a lot quicker. But now the establishment of content providers in those areas, they saw what happened in music. They've seen what happened to print, and they're holding it a little closer to the chest. They don't want to give it up just yet.
Yeah.
And that's why you have BitTorrent. I mean, I'm not advocating that. But there's a good reason it exists, because if the world has developed this entitlement mentality that I want it, and so if you won't sell it to me, I'll go get it.
Yeah,
that's an interesting marketing challenge for someone who has content to sell.
It is because as soon as you release the content in one format, it's going to be available in the other. You put it out in DVD, it's going to be online. So it is difficult, and I do feel bad for the content people, but I think that the content people have to work with what people want now, and piracy is never a good thing, but if the content makers ignore the users and the way that they want to consume that media, then unfortunately for them, they open themselves up to piracy. And you said it, I'll say it. Not that it's right, but that's what happens.
That's what happens. And if they would wake up and see it as the opportunity that it is, there are a dozen different models, if not more, some that neither one of us are smart enough to think of, to do things with this content, to put it out there for people to be able to use it the way they want to, and at a price that can make everybody some money.
Well, yeah, and that's what they want, isn't it? They want to make money from the
Sure.
content, and there are a lot of people out there, being included, that will gladly buy content.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yep. Yep. Jim, we've been at this for a while, but I would be negligent if I didn't ask you what your opinion is of BlackBerry's latest moves. And I don't want you to beat on them too much, but yeah, it's a legitimate question. They've made some interesting moves since we talked last.
Well, I'm not going to beat on BlackBerry. I thought that they had an opportunity with what is it, the Z10? Is that whatever the newest device is?
Yeah.
I thought that they had an opportunity to get themselves back, and they had one opportunity to do it. I don't think that they did it. I really don't. What RIM ended up doing was releasing a new operating system and new hardware that closely matched the iPhone and current Android devices. But that's not good enough. They needed to leapfrog where the current iPhones and Android devices were, and they didn't. And I think they missed because of that. You know, it's not. BlackBerry wasn't in a position where they could say, okay, this is good enough. We'll match what they did, because they were so far behind for so long. They needed something that they could put out and people would say, wow, this is better than the iPhone or Samsung that I have. I'm going to buy that BlackBerry. I don't hear anybody saying that. People are saying, okay, it's pretty good. It's, you know, basically what I have now. Why would I bother switching? You know, and they won't. And that's BlackBerry's missed opportunity, I think.
I can't disagree with you. I do have to wonder if this move has bought them some time, because they obviously have a fan base and a user base, and certainly in the corporate world, especially, for some reason, they seem to have standardized on BlackBerry. So I think it may have bought them some time, but I'm with you. I don't think they can do another incremental. I think they need to not play catch up. They need to play hopscotch.
I mean, from all reports, they've been working on these things for a long time. So this was their opportunity to jump ahead, and they couldn't do it. So I think that the next version of, you know, these devices will be incremental, and it's just not going to work for them, because by that time, you know, Samsung is coming out with their new S4. Apple will be out with you know, a new iPhone at some point in the next year or so, whenever they decide to release that. So, you know, when Apple and Samsung come out with their new products, the new things that BlackBerry just released are dead.
It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, it will.
At least they didn't embarrass themselves, I don't think. They may have missed the opportunity, but this one wasn't an embarrassment.
Well, except when the CEO said, yeah, in the UK, we're sold out. And then all these UK stores came out and said, no, we're not.
Well, yeah, there was that.
You know.
Yeah.
Besides that, everything was great.
Yeah. I love talking to you, because you just call them as you see them.
Well, you know, I mean, somebody has to. I guess it's me.
What else is new at the Loop? Anything in particular, or are you just chugging on the way you have?
Well, I rolled out a new responsive design for the Loop today. I don't know if it's where you are yet. You know, CDN files have to update and stuff like that, but it is on the live site. So when you go there on your iPhone, you'll see a different site than what you normally see. It's not, you know, the desktop site. It's going to be a site specifically formatted for the iPhone. The same with the iPad and, you know, other mobile devices. So I'm pretty excited about that. I haven't even announced that yet. See, I told you first. So yeah, that went out today. So I got notes from a couple of readers that said, "Hey, I love the new design, but I'm not even seeing it yet." So I know it's there, and I know it's making its way across the world. So hopefully by tomorrow it will. Let me see. We'll check. No,
Not yet. Okay.
not yet. There's also a new Retina logo, so the logo will be Retina friendly now. So that's nice. So other than that, the Loop is, it's doing very well. I'm very pleased with it. Everything to do with the site is up and doing well. So I can't really ask for any more.
Until you create the next game changer.
That's next.
That's next.
That's what I got to do next. Yeah.
Let's see, what time is it? Get on it, Jim.
This is my thinking cap right here. I have to do that before I go to bed.
All right. Well, then we won't keep you any longer because we would not want to deprive the world of those changes. Jim, it's always fun. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Folks, that's Jim Dalrymple. He is the man at The Loop at loopinsight.com. You can also hear him on his very own podcast, Amplified, over on the 5x5 network. We'll have links in the show notes to all of those things so you can find them and you can have Jim all the time. Until the next time, right here on Mac Voices, this is Mac Notables, the home of the Mac experts you want to hear from. One small commercial, folks. Check out our new Mac Voices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter. We try to keep you up to date with things that are going on behind the scenes at all the shows, maybe give you a little extra information. Please check it out. Until the next time, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for listening. Mac Voices TV is part of the Mac Voices Group at MacVoicesGroup.com. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at BackbeatMedia.com.